So tonight we're going to start with a campaign overview, looking at how far we've come in this last year for folks who might be new to this work and just joining us, and then giving you an update on our 2022 platform. We'll then chat a little bit about the legislative landscape this year and our grassroots strategy. That'll be quite a bit of information. So at the end of that, we will have time for questions. So if any questions come to mind as I'm sharing, write them down, remember them. We'll have an opportunity to answer as many as we can. And then, of course, we will end our time together chatting about some opportunities for you all to get involved in this work this legislative session, since that is, I hope, why everybody is on this advocacy call to learn how to plug in. So our Washington Can't Wait campaign is working to update our state's Growth Management Act to meet some of the challenges that we're facing today that right now the Growth Management Act doesn't really adequately address. And I'll get into that more in just a second, but for those who might be unfamiliar, the Growth Management Act, or the GMA, was written in the early 90s, and it is a statewide framework of regulations and policies that guide how local governments plan to manage their population growth and what aspects they need to consider and include in their comprehensive plans, which are updated every 8 years. So this is everything from concentrating growth in urban areas to making sure urban areas have adequate services and facilities, and ensuring that we are protecting our farms, our forests, our critical habitat. So it's a really comprehensive body of policy. It's kind of a wonky body of policy, and certainly can be kind of hard to wrap your head around. So if anybody is interested in learning a little bit more and getting a little more grounded, if you're really unfamiliar, I've just shared in the chat FutureWise's Beginner's Guide to the Growth Management Act, and that will give you a pretty good high level, but a little bit more in-depth rundown of how this body of policy works. And although the Growth Management Act has done a lot of good in the last 30 years to curb urban sprawl and protect rural landscapes, we know that it can be an even more powerful tool to impact some of the biggest crises that are facing our state. But at this time last year, when our campaign first launched, the Growth Management Act did not require jurisdictions to adequately plan for affordable housing needs. It didn't address climate change at all, which is crazy to me. All these gaps are crazy to me. It also didn't consider issues of racial and social equity in land use policy. And despite one of the core intents of the GMA being to reduce sprawl and protect rural environments, some harmful and non-compliant growth and development still occurs on some of our really precious landscapes. So we launched our Washington Can't Wait campaign last September to fill these gaps, because we knew that our state cannot wait any longer to address the housing and the climate crises through our land use planning processes. So together with so many of the people who are on this call today, we built a really broad and diverse coalition of advocates and community partners who called on our legislators to update the Growth Management Act. And this here is just a snapshot of the grassroots engagement that many of you contributed to. We had over 2,000 people on our campaign email list. We had 17 op-ed publications from our partners and advocates. We had advocates participating in 29 virtual lobbying meetings with their legislators. Over 115 advocate volunteers were working with us. We generated 16,000 emails to legislators and had the endorsement and support of 70 partners across the state. And all of that work, all of that momentum, all of that energy, all of those people contributed to some really incredible accomplishments. So last legislative session, we successfully updated the Growth Management Act's housing element with House Bill 1220, which will take really big steps to addressing Washington's housing crisis by really digging into issues of housing affordability and availability, as well as housing equity. And I'll talk more about each of these bills as we move through, so this is just pretty high level. We also got House Bill 1099, which is a bill that we were working on with Representative Doer to add a climate change planning element to the Growth Management Act through the entire House of Representatives. So it went through 2 committees, got voted off the House floor, and then we got it through the Senate Local Government Committee and the Senate Ways and Means Committee, which is pretty impressive for a pretty big climate bill that was in its first year in a landscape of a lot of other really big climate legislation. And although this bill did not ultimately pass, we were able to secure a budget proviso that has funded the Department of Commerce to begin to develop the program that cities and counties will use to meet the requirements in this bill when we pass it in 2022. So we really laid some good groundwork to add climate change to the GMA this upcoming year. And finally, we got Senate Bill 5042, which is a bill to protect forests and farms in Washington from non-compliant development, to the Senate floor, which is the furthest that we've been able to get it since it was first introduced in 2008. And absolutely none of these 3 things would have been possible without the grassroots power that we built and maintained through a really wonky virtual legislative session that kind of felt like it would never end. So another huge thanks for all of you who started this journey with us last September and are still here. And for all of you who are just joining us now, I am so excited to have you. We need as many folks in this work as we can, because this upcoming legislative session, we are going to finish everything that we started last year. And we really need to keep building our power on the ground in communities to make sure these priorities get over the finish line. So I will drop in the chat a link that will take you to our 2022 campaign platform, which I'm about to go through now, but that is just for you to have and look back at to just remind yourself of what we're working on. So we have 3 main priorities for 2022. The first is to pass House Bill 1099 to ensure that our cities and counties are planning for climate resilient communities while reducing our contributions to the climate crisis. We also are going to pass Senate Bill 5042 to protect our farmland, forests, and critical habitats from development and sprawl that is out of compliance with the Growth Management Act. And our third priority is we're working to secure funding for local governments and community-based organizations so that they can effectively implement the new housing requirements that are in House Bill 1220 to ensure that we aren't shortchanging housing equity. So in the chat, again, I'll be sharing a lot of links throughout the course of this evening, if you can't already tell. And we'll also be sending these all out in an email, so don't worry too much about getting them all down. But in the chat, I just shared links to each of these bills summaries on the Washington Legislature website. So if you're interested in actually reading the bill language or the Senate and House bill reports, you can do that by visiting any of those links. So let's just dig in a little bit to the details of each of these policies. So first we have House Bill 1220. As I mentioned, this is a bill that we are working on with Representative Doer to add a climate change requirement to the Growth Management Act. And this bill really has 2 main parts. So the first requires that our 10 most populous and fastest growing counties and the cities within them are reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and their vehicle miles traveled to meet our statewide reduction targets. And that is the work that Commerce is already being funded to start. So what they're essentially doing is developing a list of actions that cities and counties will get to choose from to meet their reduction requirements. So it'll give local jurisdictions the flexibility to make plans to reduce these things that make sense for their communities, while still ensuring that they are meeting those reduction goals. So this can be anything from creating more housing-rich urban centers that are well connected by transit and where folks can walk and bike to everything that they need, to, I don't know, the sky's the limit, because the Department of Commerce is currently working on developing this list, and we're really excited for them to kind of come out with their preliminary list of actions. And there will be hopefully opportunity to give them feedback and to let them know the things that we would like them to see included in that list. And then the second sort of part of this bill requires that all counties and cities planning under the Growth Management Act are making plans for climate change mitigation and resiliency to ensure that we are protecting our most vulnerable communities, our critical habitats, and our ecological systems from the impacts of climate hazards. So things like forest fires, drought, extreme heat, sea level rise. How through our planning process can we ensure that we are protecting people, property, and ecological systems from the worst impacts of these hazards. This bill also includes a definition of environmental justice into the Growth Management Act for the first time ever. The Growth Management Act currently does not reference environmental justice anywhere. And it stipulates that our land use planning should work to achieve environmental justice and should not worsen existing environmental health disparities. And this bill timing is really critical. This is our last chance to pass this legislation if we want these requirements to be included in the comprehensive plans of some of our largest and fastest growing counties that have their next comprehensive plan updates due in 2024. So like I mentioned earlier, because cities and counties are required to update their comprehensive plans every 8 years, if we fail to pass this bill this year, it will essentially be another decade before we have the opportunity to require that King, Pierce, Snohomish, and Kitsap counties and the cities within them are planning for climate change and considering that as they write their comprehensive plans. And we simply don't have that kind of time to wait. So it is really, really crucial that we get this bill over the finish line this year. So that's House Bill 1099. Our second priority bill is Senate Bill 5042, our sprawl loophole bill, which we've renamed about 50 times. So thank you all for bearing with us as we try to find a name that really works and that resonates with people. This is sponsored by Senator Solomon and Senator Billig and is aimed at closing a loophole in the Growth Management Act that allows for non-compliant development to occur in our rural areas. So this is just kind of a breakdown to explain how this loophole works. So this bill makes a little bit more sense. So under the Growth Management Act, counties can vote to expand their urban growth area, right? Which is kind of this invisible boundary inside which cities have to concentrate and counties have to concentrate the majority of their growth. And outside of which are rural landscapes where we're not really supposed to be building because we need to protect them, right? So if a county thinks that they need to expand an urban growth area or de-designate farmland or take some other action that will open up more land to more intensive development, they can decide to do that. If individuals or organizations like FutureWise think that that proposed action is unnecessary, they can appeal the decision to the Growth Management Hearings Board. And that is sort of the body that hears cases and appeals as they relate to the Growth Management Act and the comprehensive planning process. The board will then consider the appeal and make a decision. And this process can take several months. And so while that appeals process is taking place, counties can issue permits to developers to build in the expanded area. And as soon as those permits are accepted, they're considered to be vested, which essentially freezes developers' rights in time. In addition to issuing permits, cities can also annex that land into their city boundaries, which essentially moots our appeal. And this is really where we find the loophole, because any permits that are issued and vested or annexations that take place while the appeals process is occurring remain valid no matter what the Growth Management Hearings Board decides. So even if they rule that the expansion is illegal, development in those areas can still proceed. So it's a pretty big loophole that, like I said, really it undermines the intent of the Growth Management Act, and it really takes the integrity away from the Growth Management Hearings Board as this body that really acts as sort of an enforcement mechanism for comprehensive planning processes. So Senate Bill 5042 offers a really simple solution to this problem by setting a new effective date for various actions that counties might take to open up more land for development, so that those actions don't actually go into effect until after the appeal period has passed or the Growth Management Hearings Board has considered and made a ruling on the appeal. So again, a really simple solution to close this loophole and really give the Growth Management Hearings Board that kind of integrity back, and make sure that we're not allowing cities and counties to develop in a way that's not compliant with the Growth Management Act. And then our final priority is to get implementation funding for House Bill 1220, which, like I mentioned, was signed into law last year. So just a reminder of what this bill does. It requires jurisdictions to plan for adequate housing affordable for all economic segments, with special consideration to low, very low, and extremely low income households. This includes identifying sufficient land and zoning capacities for housing at those income levels, as well as for emergency housing, emergency shelters, and permanent supportive housing. It also requires jurisdictions to identify and address the impacts of racially discriminatory housing policies that have resulted in racially disparate impacts, displacement, and exclusion in our communities. And finally, they must identify areas that are at a higher risk for displacement from market forces and establish anti-displacement policies to keep folks from getting priced out of their neighborhoods and their homes. So this work, implementing this bill, is really vitally important, and we know that it will not have the impact that it needs to have if we don't give local governments resources to implement these requirements. And we also know that it is vital that the implementation process is being driven by the needs and the experiences of those who are most impacted by the housing crisis. So our third and final priority with the campaign this year is to get funding that will be available for community-based organizations that are on the ground working on housing issues in their community, to participate in and inform the implementation of this bill. Yeah, so those are our priorities, but what's kind of our strategy for getting all this work done? So if you want to hit that next slide, Kate. Yeah, thank you. So we believe that both House Bill 1099 and Senate Bill 5042 have pretty clear paths through the House. So we are focusing most of our education and our advocacy efforts in the Senate. So Senate Bill 5042 will start in Senate rules, and we're hoping that it will move really quickly to the Senate floor for a vote. It won't have to go back to a policy committee in the Senate, which is really good news. Then if and when it passes off the Senate floor, it will move over to the House Local Government Committee and go through that whole process in the House. House Bill 1099 will start in the House Rules Committee. We're working with leadership to get it off the floor and over to the Senate as quickly as possible, where it will likely go through the Housing and Local Government Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. And then we're currently working with members to sort of figure out the ask and the exact strategy for getting funding to community-based organizations to help implement House Bill 1220. This will likely not be a separate bill, so advocacy to make this happen will look a little bit different than testifying in hearings and doing those things that we usually do to get a bill passed. This work will likely mostly be done in the Senate and House fiscal committees to secure funding through a budget proviso. So really focusing in on the people who sit on those committees will be really important to making sure that funding gets allocated. So kind of on that thread, the key committees for these priorities, as I just mentioned, are the House Local Government Committee, the House Appropriations Committee, the Senate Housing and Local Government Committee, and the Senate Ways and Means Committee. So I'm sharing a link in the chat now. If you don't know who your senators or your legislators are, you can use this link to find out. And you can also look up what committees they're on. And if any one of your legislators sits on one of these 4 committees, they are a key decision maker for the fate of our legislative priorities. And it is super, super, super important that they hear from you, their constituents, that these are things they should be prioritizing in 2022. And in addition to these committees, there are several individual legislators who will be key decision makers for the success of this campaign. Some of them are folks who we know we need to sway to support these bills, and others are people we know are going to vote yes, but we really want them to kind of take a step beyond just voting yes and be vocal champions for these bills to really rally their colleagues and stand up and make them priorities in caucus. So in that first group, we have Senators Mullet, Senator Vandaway, and Senator Cleveland. They're the ones that we really need to work on to vote yes on both House Bill 1099 and Senate Bill 5042. So Mark Mullet voted without recommendation on House Bill 1099 last year, which is essentially just not voting on it. Senator Vandaway voted no on House Bill 1099. Senator Cleveland voted yes, but we're not necessarily confident that she'll vote yes again. And we really aren't sure how any of these folks are going to vote on Senate Bill 5042. So if any of these three are your legislators, again, I would love to hear from you, to work with you to figure out how we can kind of sway them to vote yes on these things. And then this other group, so this list we see on the right-hand side, are a lot of our legislators who are traditional environmental champions in their respective chambers. And they're folks who we really need to not only vote yes, but to make sure that these bills are a priority and that they get brought up for a vote. It's a short session. There's a bit of a time crunch here. And so we need to really make sure that Senate Bill 5042 and House Bill 1099 are top priority, and things that enough people in the legislature are calling for, that they get brought up for votes in committee and on the floor. And so again, I see some folks sharing in the chat if they see their legislators on this list. If you do, we really need your help, whether you send emails, make phone calls, are willing to meet with them in a virtual lobbying session. We are very excited and happy to work with you. That being said, if your legislator isn't on this list, that does not mean they're not important and that we don't need you to reach out and connect with them. These are just the folks in particular that are kind of high on our priority list to focus on this session. And then just to offer you a little bit of a roadmap of where we've been and where we're heading with our campaign timeline. So we spent September through the end of November really focusing on building our base. So we've been having one-on-ones with our advocates. We've been meeting with organizational partners and legislators. We've been having educational events. And then come December, we are going to start bugging our legislators in earnest. December 2nd, we're having a virtual lobbying training. We're going to go over how the legislature works, how to virtually lobby your legislators, give you resources and talking points, and support you to set up pre-session meetings with your representatives and senators. And then the week of December 6th to 10th, we are organizing a week of action. And so this will be 5 days of educational events and advocacy opportunities to make sure that these priorities are on our legislators' radar prior to the holidays and prior to the start of session. We're also working once again this year on an op-ed campaign to support advocates to write and submit op-eds to publications across the state during the month of December. Gosh, yeah, the month of December. Then in January, we will be off to the races. Session starts January 10th, the second Monday in January, and it will run through March 10th. So we will be working hard for those 2 months to pressure our legislators by engaging our base of supporters and partners through events and action alerts in response to what's happening during session. And all of this we're going to do by utilizing what we call the inside-outside approach. So on the inside, we have our lobbyist, Bryce Yaden, who is focusing on crafting our policies and on lobbying and engaging with key legislators and partners throughout the session. And the information that he gathers from his work helps us to inform our outside strategy. And that's our grassroots work. So as we continue to organize a strong and diverse grassroots campaign of individuals and organizations, we're going to be supporting you all to pressure your legislators to pass these updates from the outside as well. And it's this outside approach where we really need you all and we really need your help. But before we get into ways that you can all help us advocate this session, I do want to pause. I'm running a little bit over, so I can probably take like 5-ish minutes to answer any questions you might have. And then any questions we don't get to, you can feel free to reach out to me via email and I will make sure we get you answers to your questions. So Kate, I don't know if there's been any questions in the chat that need to get answered that haven't been. I haven't been watching it. Or if you do have a question, feel free to post it in the chat now and we'll answer as many as we can.
No questions yet, but no time like the present to throw them in the chat or hop off mute to ask it. We have a question, best case scenario, when would 5042 take effect? The loophole bill.
Yeah.
Great question, B. We might need to check in with our lawyer on that front.
Yeah, I am not sure when it would go into, yeah, I'm not sure, but we can, if you put your email in the chat, we can ask Bryce, who unfortunately was not feeling well tonight. Otherwise, he would have been here to help answer these questions. We can ask him and get back to you on exactly when that would go into effect. And we can also add it to our talking points and our resources that we share out with you all.
Fabulous. We have a question or more of a comment that I think we're already on top of, which is it would be helpful to lay out a schedule in an email so we know what to do and when. We can definitely do that for you, Serena. And then we had a question up a little bit higher in the chat. What's the best way to make contact with legislators? And Linda, we're actually about to get into that shortly. So maybe we'll put a pin in that because that's actually the whole next section. Mm-hmm. We have a question, does vesting bill only cover subdivisions or also other kinds of development? My understanding is that it's all kinds of any permitted, any permits that are, you know, going to be in an annexed area or in an area outside of the UGA would be covered by the vesting bill, Serena. Mm-hmm. Super. Any other questions before we get into how to do it?
Okay.
I hope this means we've been terribly thorough and you just know everything you could possibly need to know. And it's not because you're all tuned out of this drinking a beer and only half paying attention. Hint, hint. Come back.
And I will put I just shared my email in the chat again. If any questions come up, please feel free to reach out. That is my whole job, is supporting you all to really understand these things and take action. So that is what I'm here for, to be a resource for you. But with that in mind, how can you all plug in and contribute to this work to ensure that we really win big in 2022? I'm going to go through a few different ways for you to engage. And we'll be sharing links in the chat that will also go out in a follow-up email after this meeting. So again, don't worry too much about copying them down. And I will go through all of these different, thank you, Carrie, a couple different actions, and then we're going to take some time to allow you all to fill out our advocacy form, and that will just allow you to tell me which of these actions you're interested in participating in so that I can follow up with you one-on-one and connect you with resources and information and answer your questions. So please do stick around through this last part. This is the crucial information, everybody. So the first and the easiest way to advocate with the campaign throughout the session is to join our email list, and you will get weekly updates throughout the legislative session that give you a rundown of what's happened in session or what we think is happening in the next week. And we'll have some really easy actions that you can take to contact your legislators. And those will include email scripts, call scripts, social media posts that you can just copy and paste and tag your legislators in. We really do try to make those calls to action as easy and taking as little time out of your day as possible. So I dropped the link in the chat to join that email list. The second, and perhaps one of the most impactful things you can do, is to meet with your legislator in a virtual lobbying meeting. So if you are interested in meeting with your legislator, please consider coming to our virtual lobbying training, which will be on December 6th from December 2nd from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. If you can't make it, we will be recording it so you can watch the recording later. And in that meeting, we'll be doing a deep dive into how the legislature works, the do's and don'ts of lobbying, going over talking points for our bills, again, answering questions that you might have about what talking points will be good for your particular legislator. And it'll also be a chance for you to connect with a lobbying team of other advocates in your district so that you can coordinate and get a meeting set up with your legislator. Veronica, one of our really amazing volunteers, is already working on scheduling meetings throughout December with a lot of our key decision makers. And so we'll have a kind of list and calendar of those meetings. And if you live in those districts, I'll be reaching out to you as we get those meetings set up to ask if you're interested in participating. If you live in a district where we haven't set up a meeting for you, at this training, we will be giving you all the resources and support that you need to reach out and set up those meetings yourselves. It is quite easy once you know how to do it. And then the third thing you can do to have a huge impact on this work is to write an op-ed or a letter to the editor to submit to a local publication. This is a really incredible way to increase awareness and educate folks in your area about the campaign, and another great way to flag these issues for your legislators. If you call your legislators out by name in an op-ed or an LTE, asking them to vote yes on a particular piece of legislation, chances are that is going to land on their desk and they're going to see it and they're going to read it. So this is a really, really, really great way to get involved, also to just continue to develop your skills as writers and, you know, your ability to craft really compelling narratives and call your communities into action. So we've written a really comprehensive op-ed guide with writing tips, example op-eds. It has links to all of our op-eds that got published last year from our volunteers. And so that's a really great place to start. But again, if this is something you're interested in, the form that we're going to fill out in just a couple minutes, you can let me know that you want to write an op-ed and I can reach out to help you and support you in any way that you might need. Last year, as I mentioned before, we had over 30 advocates submit op-eds across the state. 17 of them were accepted for publication. These are just screenshots of all of the titles of these incredible op-eds that we had. And this is just a really great way for us to build momentum and get more visibility and increase folks' awareness about what we're working on. And we really want to beat 17 this year. So if you want to help us get over 17 op-eds, we'd love to work with you in writing something. And then finally, I would just be so honored if you all would join us the week of December 6th for our week of action. I'll share the registration link in the chat. This will be 5 days of educational events and opportunities to take a variety of actions to contact your legislators. So if you want to hit that next slide, Kate. So this is kind of the schedule for the week. There might be some more things added into this as we get a little bit closer. So it starts on Monday. We're going to have a Washington Can't Wait text bank, which is a really fun way to contact a bunch of constituents across the state and ask them to take action. We'll be doing a training on how to use through text, and then we'll be texting folks together. You don't need to use your phone. It's all through a software program. We'll also be coloring virtually during it. It's super fun. If anybody on this call has text banked with us before, put a star in the chat. I think there's some people here who maybe joined us. If not, you should totally come. It'll be fun. Tuesday, we'll be having a bunch of different, yes, Allegra. Allegra joined us for text banking last year. Tuesday, we'll be doing different advocacy actions for House Bill 1099. We'll also have a panel on climate change and land use and sort of that intersection from 11:30 to 12:30. Wednesday, we'll be taking advocacy for Senate Bill 5042. And then Thursday, we are co-sponsoring an event on the intersection of public health and land use with the Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility. That'll be from 6:30 to 7:30. And then Friday, we're going to be playing land use trivia from 4 to 4:45 to celebrate a week of really great advocacy. So by registering at that link that I shared in the chat, you will get daily emails with easy actions to take, as well as access to this week's exciting events. So we really hope that you all will participate. again, it really is important to kind of do this work prior to session to make sure that these things are really at the top of our legislators' radars as we move towards January 10th. So those are some of the ways and most impactful things you can do to advocate at this point in time. If any of these actions resonated with you, or if you have another idea about what you as an individual can contribute to this campaign, we really want to hear about it. So we're just going to take a few minutes here, like 3 minutes before we wrap up. And I'm going to ask you all, if you feel called to work with us this year, to fill out our advocacy form. That's the first link that I just shared in the chat. That will allow you to indicate what actions you want to take so that I can give you the resources and information that you need. This is also going to be a really great chance to just go ahead and register for our lobbying training and our week of action. Those links are also in the chat. So we're just gonna listen to a couple minutes of groovy music that Kate's gonna queue up. Give you all some time to fill out our form and register for these events. And let us know when you do. If you fill out the advocacy form, drop a star in the chat. If you register for our lobbying training, go ahead and put a plus in the chat. And if you pledge to take action with us the week of December 6th, put a $sign in the chat. We really do need all the help that we can get to make this happen this year. And I am here to support you in any way that you need. We have lots of resources, lots of materials to help you advocate that I will share with you once I know how you want to be involved. So that is all we have for you this evening. I hope you all leave tonight with a better grasp of what we are working on this year and ideas for how you want to be involved. You'll get a follow-up email from me in the next day with a recording of this meeting, as well as all the links and resources and opportunities that we shared here today. And if you fill out our advocacy form, I will also reach out to you individually to make sure that you have everything you need to make a difference this session. Thanks, Paul. You can contact me for any and all of your advocacy needs and questions. And if you have policy questions, you can give those to me also, and I will get answers from our team. Thank you all. Me is Jamie. Sorry, Jamie Potasic. I am our lead organizer. I'm sharing my email in the chat. It is just jamie@futurewise.org. Yeah, please reach out to me with any questions. I'm really happy to work with you all. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your nights and have a really joy-filled week of holiday festivities. Eat lots of good food, and we'll see you all soon.